Hey, good afternoon. My name is Ciara Torres-Spelliscy, and I'm here to talk to you about the role of nonprofits after Citizens United. And you may take from my talk that I'm anti-nonprofit, and that's actually not the case. I am anti-multinational corporations hiding behind nonprofits. So this is a picture of my father. I was raised by the most dangerous man in America, an educated black man. Um, he was a sculptor and a very creative thinker, and when I was young, he told me to ask the big questions. And I think the big question right now is, what is the proper role of corporate money in a democracy? I think one problem with corporate money in a democracy is the effect on the democracy itself. And don't kid yourselves, this is the cover of the New York Times the day Nixon resigned. The stakes are incredibly high here. We've lost a president before because of campaign finance problems. I don't want to have to lose another president because we didn't figure out how to do money in politics in a sane way. And if you are young like I am, I was not alive during Watergate. And I recently wrote this law review article, and every time I opened the Senate Select Committee on Watergate, my hair would start to curl because, and now you can see the result. It was so bad. It was so bad. And so if you are, if you need a refresher course, take a look at this. And the reason that I called this "How Much is an Ambassadorship" is Nixon's fundraisers, they were selling ambassadorships to the highest bidder. And the going rate was $250,000 in 1972 dollars, which is over $1 million today. The other problem with corporate money in a democracy is that it's not the manager's money to spend. If you're talking about a publicly traded company, then that money is somewhat attributable to shareholders. So that is other people's money, as Justice Brandeis used to say. And I think the big paradigm shift that Citizens United made was actually inside the corporation itself. And here's how it goes. So a CEO before Citizens United, if he wanted to spend money in a federal election, he had to pull out his own personal checkbook, and then he could spend as much as he wanted buying political ads for his favorite political candidates. That was his right under Buckley v. Vallejo. But after Citizens United, he can use his other hand, and he can grab into another pocket, and he can pull out the corporate checkbook. So the corporate checkbook is the one where it has the corporate logo on it, and where, more importantly, the bill does not go to his house. So behind a corporate checkbook is, as Justice Brandeis said, other people's money. And I think when you have other people's money involved, we should have stricter regulations. And one of the reasons that you want stricter regulations is the interests of shareholders and corporate managers are not always perfectly aligned. Corporate law recognizes this, and they have special rules when those interests diverge. And I think corporate political spending is one of those instances where the interests of shareholders and managers can diverge. So the manager may want that ambassadorial position. The shareholder wants a good stock price. Those are not necessarily the same thing. The other thing that the manager might want is the invitation to the inaugural ball. And so that may be good for the manager in his career, but is not necessarily good for his company. For you visual learners out there, I wanted to remind you that Citizens United didn't just change federal law, it also changed state law. And so this is what the map looked like before Citizens United. The states in green allowed corporate money, and the states in white didn't allow corporate money. And after Citizens United, this is what the map looks like. Corporate money is allowed everywhere, both in federal elections and in state elections. But every dark cloud does have a silver lining. And the silver lining for me with Citizens United is its holding on disclosure, which was 8-1. The one, if you're curious, is Justice Thomas. And I think we can take the old lesson from Watergate that if you want to know what's going on in American politics, what you have to do is follow the money. And there are great resources, opensecrets.org and followthemoney.org. Open Secrets tracks money in federal races. Follow the Money tracks money in state races. And so this is from this federal election, and this is some money going into super PACs. And this is all publicly traded corporate money. And one of these things is not like the others. It's this one, the Pilot Corporation. They are a Japanese pen company. They gave $100,000 to American Crossroads. And if you'll recall, when President Obama said in his State of the Union, I'm worried that there's going to be foreign money in American elections, and Justice Alito is like shaking his head and mouthing, not true, not true, not true. Well, if there are journalists in the room, please look into this. Please look into this. I need to know that this wasn't a Japanese company spending money in my election. So one of the problems with Open Secrets and followthemoney.org, as good as they are, they're only as good as the laws that report campaign finance spending. And there are huge loopholes in the disclosure regime. And so this brings me to my favorite obscure Simpsons quote, which is, I can't see through I can't see through metal, Kent. And the metal that I can't see through are 501c4s and 501c6s. So in 2010, which was the first post-Citizens United election, 42% of the outside spending was dark. In the initial data from this election is that 23% of it is dark, but don't get encouraged because once you look at the aggregate numbers, so in 2010, it was about $135 million was dark. This election, it looks like it's going to be $300 million was dark. And again, the dark things that I can't see through are 501c4s, which are social welfare organizations, and 501c6s, which are trade associations. And here's how they do it, kids. So this is how money from a publicly traded corporation could get into an American election without voters or investors being any the wiser. Okay, so you start at your publicly traded company. They are under no duty to disclose at the SEC that they are spending money in politics. Then it goes to the black box. So either the trade association or the 501c4. The 501c4 or 501c6 does indeed report to the IRS, but that is not reported to the public. Then the trade association buys a television ad, and it will say somewhere on there, brought to you by the Chamber of Commerce, but it won't say that it was brought to you by this publicly traded company. And then you say, well, don't we have a Federal Election Commission? And indeed we do. So when the trade association reports at the FEC, it is perfectly legal for them to report, we had a $1 million ad buy, but we have magically 0 donors. And the way that you get away with this is only earmarked donations have to be reported, and no one clever enough to use this system is stupid enough to earmark. So the long story short of all of this is that the public can't tell that a corporation is actually behind a given political ad. And so how could a 28th Amendment change some of this? And it could possibly get all nonprofits out of all politics. It could get some nonprofits out of all politics, or it could get all nonprofits out of some politics, and I guess it could get some nonprofits out of some politics. I don't think it'll actually get all nonprofits out of all politics, in part because nonprofits have very litigious lawyers. I can't see them letting this lie. But one of the equilibriums that might be reached is something that we had for basically a quarter of a century between a case called Massachusetts Citizens for Life and Citizens United. So in that time period, the federal law allowed for ideological nonprofits that were individually funded, had no corporate funds in them, to spend in federal elections as if they were individuals. And I think that kind of equilibrium might happen if the Constitution is amended again. The other thing that might happen is if the amended Constitution is deemed to overrule Bilotti, then you might, for the first time in a very long time, have ballot initiative fights that didn't have corporations in them and didn't have nonprofits like, and some people think of nonprofits as like teeny tiny entities. Think again. Pharma is a nonprofit under our law. They have been huge in funding many, like 311 California initiatives in the past 11 years. So you might have an entirely different world if you actually took nonprofits out of the ballot initiative process. So, since it may take some time to get a constitutional amendment, some solutions in the meantime. First, we have this notice problem, which is basically that publicly traded corporations don't have to tell their shareholders or the public that they're spending in politics. So I think that the Securities and Exchange Commission needs to promulgate a rule that requires transparency for all corporate political spending. And the other problem with corporate political spending is from the shareholders' point of view, there is no opportunity to consent in the same way that union members get to like opt in, opt out. There's none of that in the corporate world. So a binding shareholder vote, which they have in the UK, I think is well overdue in the United States. And if you need some encouragement, after reading my depressing Watergate piece, if you need some encouragement, look at this piece. Has the tide turned in favor of disclosure? It actually has. Lower courts after Citizens United have been almost unanimous in upholding disclosure laws. And so the good news, with the exception of the Eighth Circuit, is that disclosure is winning in the courts. And so one of the open questions is, will Congress act on this? Another question is, will our federal agencies act on this? And because I'm short on time, I'm going to speed up to what I'm working on, which is the petition at the SEC. So I work with a group called the Corporate Reform Coalition, and we have garnered a record-setting 300,000 comments at the Securities and Exchange Commission. We have broken the record for the number of comments that have ever come in on a single petition. And I think this issue is at the tipping point. And if you are interested in this, please don't be silent. Don't be so depressed about this stuff that you just, give up on the public comment process at the federal agencies. I think you can really make a difference if you put your name in and tell the SEC we need this type of transparency. So the struggle to turn the lights on in our democracy continue. And this is my, oh gosh, it's, of course, Microsoft Word is fighting me. But if you want to check out the Corporate Reform Coalition, it's just corporatereformcoalition.org. Thank you.